Hey guys, welcome back for another very exciting tutorial here at the PhotoshopTrainingChannel.com. My name is Jesus Ramirez. You can find me on Twitter at JRFromPTC. In this tutorial, we'll turn this ordinary pumpkin into a frightening Halloween jack-o'-lantern. We'll create this image by taking advantage of layer styles and adjustment layers. If at any point you get confused, rewind the video and watch it again. We'll be covering a lot in this tutorial. And if you still have any comments or questions, feel free to leave them down below. Also, don't forget to download the tutorial asset files so you can follow along. So head over to my website, PhotoshopTrainingChannel.com, look for this tutorial, and download the files. Okay guys, let's get started. The first thing I'm going to do is create the document we're going to be working with. So I'm going to go to File, New, and we're going to have a document that's 1920 by 1080. I'm going to press OK, and I'm going to fill this background layer with black. So I'm going to hold Alt and Backspace, that's Option and Backspace on the Mac, to fill with the foreground color. And the reason we're going to be working with black is because it's going to be easier to see, but you can work with whatever background color you want. I'm now going to bring in the picture of the pumpkin that we're going to be working with. So I'm going to go to File, Place, and I have this image here of the pumpkin. And I'm going to click on it and then click on Place. And it's going to bring in the pumpkin. I'm just going to make it a little bit smaller, maybe about this big, and move it to the side and move it up just a bit, somewhere around there. I'm going to hit enter to accept the transformation, and notice that when we use the place command, it automatically turns the pumpkin into a smart object. If you brought in the image of the pumpkin in another way, make sure you convert it into a smart object before you start working on it. And by the way, this image is going to be included with the tutorial, so you can go to my website, PhotoshopTrainingChannel.com, and look at the bottom of the page to download the assets for this tutorial. I've gone ahead and cropped out the background for you already just because we don't need to spend time doing that with this tutorial since you've seen me do it in other tutorials. If you're using a different pumpkin, then go ahead and extract the pumpkin from the background. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to sharpen up the pumpkin a little bit. I'm going to zoom in just so you can see what's going on. So this is our pumpkin here, and I'm going to go to, I have the pumpkin selected, so I'm going to go to Filter, Sharpen, Unsharp Mask, and these settings are actually okay. The amount of 102%, radius of 4.6, and threshold of 8, and you can see the before and after. You can see the difference here actually in the highlights, so before and after. So it just sharpens the pumpkin a little bit more. I'm going to click on this arrow to collapse the filters just because we need some real estate and we don't need to see them. I'm going to now add an inner glow to this layer. So I'm going to double click on it in the space here in between the text and the thumbnail to bring up the layer style panel. So I'm going to click on inner glow. I'm going to select multiply. I'm going to select black. And I'm going to increase the size just a little bit, maybe around 35 or so. Then I'm going to press OK. So it just adds this shadow on the outside of the pumpkin. I'm now going to add a curves adjustment layer, and this curves adjustment layer is going to give a little contrast to the pumpkin, and I only want the pumpkin to be affected by this adjustment layer, not anything else below it. There's nothing else below now, but there will be in the future, so I want to make sure that it only affects this pumpkin. So I'm going to turn it into a clipping mask by clicking on this icon that you see here. Now that we have this down pointing arrow, the curves adjustment layer will only affect the pumpkin. So I'm just going to bring in the blacks, maybe here, and then just maybe bring this down right here. Notice that when we add this curves adjustment layer, it oversaturates some of the colors. To fix that, we can just change the blending mode to luminosity, and it only makes it dark now without really affecting the colors. So that's what you want to do. I'm going to add a hue saturation adjustment layer now. I'm also going to clip it to the pumpkin, but now I'm going to use the keyboard shortcut. I'm going to hold Alt, hover in between the layers, and then click, and it'll be clicked to the pumpkin as well. And I'm just going to bring the saturation down just a little bit, so maybe something like negative 35 or so. Negative 36 will be okay. So that just sort of brings the saturation down, since this is going to be a night scene and we don't need a lot of color in the pumpkin. Now I'm going to add a color lookup adjustment layer, and the color lookup allows you to add different looks to your images just by selecting any one of these, and it instantly gives a new look to your image, and the one that I'm looking for is night from day. It sort of makes it seem as if the pumpkin was in a nighttime shot, which is what we want. And of course, I'm going to clip this to the pumpkin, and I'm going to bring the opacity down maybe around 75%, and set it to luminosity. So this is the result we get here. I'm going to click on the pumpkin, press Ctrl J, Command J on the Mac to duplicate it. I'm going to grab the bottom pumpkin and drag it all the way to the top. And this is going to be the pumpkin that's going to be the highlight areas. So I'm going to add a layer mask by clicking on the layer mask icon, but I'm going to hold Alt, Option on the Mac, before I click. That way it fills the layer with black and it hides the mask completely. Now if I press B on the keyboard to bring up my brush tool and I select white for my foreground color, I can start painting in highlights like you see here. Now you see this weird outline there. That's because we have an inner glow effect. We can just turn that off and you see the difference. So now we have the highlight where the eyes and the mouth will be. And we don't need to be too exact. I know that the eyes and the mouth will be in this area here. So I'm just going to paint like so. Now I'm going to add a hue saturation adjustment layer. But what I'm going to do first is I'm going to click on the layer mask. And it's going to select the visible pixels of this layer. Then I'll add a hue saturation adjustment layer so they both have the same mask. I'm going to click on colorize and I'm going to set the hue to about 50. Saturation, I'm going to bump that up to maybe about 77. And brightness, I'll brighten that up to maybe 15 or so. Then I'm going to set the blending mode to color dodge. And I'm going to bring the opacity way down. Maybe 15% or so. It just makes the pumpkin look a little bit hotter, which is what we want since there's going to be fire inside of here. Okay, now I'm going to take the top layer, hold shift, click on the bottom layer to select them all. I'm going to press Ctrl G, and I'm just going to call this layer pumpkin. I'm now going to add a new layer, and we're going to start drawing the eyes. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to select a hard brush, and and I'm going to bring the size down, and I'm going to draw the eye. And I'm just going to go sort of quickly here. So this is the eye here. And I'm just going to make the brush a little bit bigger and fill that in. As you can see here, this is looking okay, and it'll do the job, but there's a problem. In my opinion, I think that if this were a real jack-o'-lantern, the edges wouldn't be so sharp. There would be a lot of jagginess around the edges. So one way to create that will be by creating a brush that will draw jagged edges as opposed to straight lines. So what we're going to do is we're going to click on the brush panel icon to bring up the brush panel, and I'm going to click on shape dynamics and increase the size jitter, and click on scattering and just bring up the scattering just a little bit, and maybe decrease the spacing down to 1%. So now when I draw, you see that I don't have a straight sharp line. There's a lot of jagginess, and that's what I want. So I'm going to go ahead and delete this layer, add a new one, and I'm going to zoom out, and I'm going to start drawing the eye again, like so. And what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to click on the magic wand, and I'm going to go to select, modify, expand. I'll expand it by 2 pixels, and I'll fill with black. Control D, Command D to deselect. So now you see the jagginess on the pumpkin. So it's not a straight line, which is exactly what I want. And this is going to be the shape that we're going to use for our eye. And the first thing I'm going to do is just reshape the eye a little bit. I think that it's a good idea to work with the natural grooves and edges and texture of the pumpkin. So maybe I can just come in and sort of use this line to define how the carving of the pumpkin should be. So just come along the line there, maybe go in here a little bit. Just sort of use these natural highlights and these lines to help you create a more realistic eye. So something like that. And of course, you might want to take more time than what I just did, but you sort of get the idea. I used the same technique in the rock text tutorial that I did a few months ago, so you can check that out too, and it's the same idea behind the technique. Now that we have the shape of the eyes created, we're going to start adding some layer styles to make it look as if this were part of a pumpkin. So what I'm going to do first is double click on the layer to bring up the layer style panel, and I'm going to add a bevel and emboss. And actually, let me move that to the side here so you can sort of see it. Actually, I'll cancel that and I'll move this here maybe just so we can see it. There we go. We can see it better now. So I'm going to add a bevel and emboss, and I'm going to use an outer bevel, and I'm going to need a depth of about 70 or so percent. So bring that down. 72 will work. And I want my bevel to be down, not up. So you see the difference there? It sort of looks like it's pushing out. If I click on down, it sort of looks as if it's pushing in, which is what I want. But I'm going to bring the size in more, so maybe something like 8 pixels or so. And I'm going to soften it up just a little bit, just 1 pixel. I'm not going to use the global light because I want to move the light independently from all the other layer styles. So I'm just going to move this and place it somewhere around there, maybe 135 over 32, something like that should work fine. And for the highlight mode, I'm going to change that to normal, and we're going to set the color to a light orange, so we can pick a color out of the pumpkin here. So let me find a nice highlight color somewhere around here. This seems to be a nice highlight right about here, and actually that's still a little too dark and not quite the orange that I was looking for, so maybe I'm going to bring that up a little bit and maybe move this over to the left and something like that. That's a nice highlight color there. I'm going to leave the opacity at 75%, and I'm going to select a dark color, and I'll do the same. I'll try to find a color that works, and there's a nice dark reddish color here that I actually like that color, so we'll leave that there. Okay, so now we have our bevel and emboss, and you can see that it does look as if the pumpkin has been carved in, but it's a nice smooth bevel, and it doesn't look organic. It looks sort of like plastic a little bit, so I need to add some texture into my bevel. So I'm going to click on texture, and right away, as soon as I add that texture, you see those lines there, and that's exactly what I want. So the pattern that I've selected is found under Artist Brushes Canvas, and just press OK and select the first one, which is the Italian canvas, and you see how you get that result there, which makes it seem a lot more like a pumpkin would look like. And I'm just going to bring the depth to maybe 50%, or yeah, 50% will be fine. I'll just type that in, 50. Now I'm going to add a color overlay, and I have a predetermined color for that, B03D05, which is that orange color there. And I'm going to add a pattern overlay, and I'm going to go to Artist Surfaces, press OK, and I want the pattern that I'm looking for is dark coarse weave, this first one here. And you know what, the reason you can't see the pattern is because our cover overlay is set to 100% opacity. So I'm going to move that down a little bit, so maybe at about 70%. So you can see the pumpkin here. This will obviously be the pulp of the pumpkin, and don't worry about it if it just seems too flat now. We'll fix that later. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to add an outer glow to the eye, and I'm just going to set this to a yellow color that I predetermined, which is FFDE00. Press OK, and I'm going to change the blending mode to linear dodge, and I'm going to bring the opacity down to about 30 or so percent. 32 will be okay, and bring the size down to 10 pixels. And I'm going to also add an inner shadow. In this inner shadow, I'm going to leave at multiply, and the color that I want is C85812, which is that orange color there. I'm going to bring the distance down a little bit, so maybe 16. I'll leave the choke at 0, and the size I'll bring that down to maybe 10. And I'm going to press OK. So now you see the eye of the pumpkin here, and it's starting to look a little more realistic. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to command click on the layer thumbnail to make a selection out of the eye. I'm going to create a new layer and fill that with black. I'm also going to click on the layer mask icon to make a layer mask out of that selection. And then I'm going to click on this icon here, which links the layer mask to the layer. So now I can move them independently of each other. I'm going to click on the layer thumbnail. I'm going to press V on the keyboard, and I can now move this layer. And you can sort of see what I'm going to do. If I move it down just a little bit, down into the right, you can now see that I have this that looks a lot like an extrusion. So this is going to be the pulp over a pumpkin. So actually, this is a good spot for it. I'll leave that there. I'm going to double click on the layer to bring up the layer styles, and I'm going to add a bevel and emboss. I'm going to go to outer bevel. I'm going to bring the size down to 5 pixels. Soften it up just a little bit. And although I'm not going to change the angle, I'm still going to uncheck use global light in case I move it elsewhere. I don't want it to affect this layer style. I'm going to leave the highlight color at white, but I'm going to change the blending mode to soft light. And you can kind of see what that did. It created this highlight along the edge of the extrusion there. Then I'm going to select a different color for this, and it's going to be E2A35A, which is that light orange color there. Press OK. And I'm just going to bring the opacity down just a little bit, something like that. I'm going to click on Gradient Overlay, and I'm going to move this to the side just so you can see it better. Right here. And I'm going to double click on the Gradient Editor, double click on that to bring up the Gradient Editor. And I'm going to click on this preset here. I'm going to double click on this orange one, and I'm going to turn that to white. Then press OK. Then I'm going to select a radial style, and I'm going to click on reverse to flip that around. So the white is in the inside with a yellow ring and an orange ring around it. And I'm going to uncheck align with layer. That way I have more control over this gradient overlay. So I'm going to you can actually click and drag as you see me doing here. So I'm going to click and drag so the white is in the corner of the eye there. And I'm going to scale it down a little bit. Maybe around there, 42% seems to be okay. So I'm just going to leave that there so we have white, orange, and yellow. And now I'm going to add an outer glow. And I'm going to change the blend mode to normal. And the color that I want is FF6E02. And now you can see how it's making that look a lot hotter. So you see that there? I'm gonna bring the size down just a little bit. I think it might be a little too strong, so maybe around 6 or 7 pixels will be okay. And then I'm gonna press OK. Okay, so now we have 2 layers. We have this original layer, which is the shape of the eye and the outside part of the eye, and this shape here that creates the illusion of an extrusion of the pulp, and the inside of the eye. Now, to take this to the next level, we need to create 2 adjustment layers, 2 curves adjustment layers. So I'm going to create a new curves adjustment layer, and I'm just going to click and drag this up. And I'm only concerned about the area here, which is the pulp. So you can drag that up, and you're concerned about this area here. And just make sure you don't overblow it too much. So maybe around here. And then I'm going to fill that with black. I'm going to create another curves adjustment layer, and I'm going to do the same thing, but this time I'm going to make the image dark. And I'm going to fill that with black as well. I'm going to put these 2 curves adjustment layers into one group, so I'm going to select them both, press Ctrl G, Command G on the Mac to put them into one group. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to Control click, Command click on the layer thumbnail for the original shape, and I'm going to hold Alt, Control, and click on the layer right above that, on the second layer, which will give us a selection of only the pulp or the extrusion part of the pumpkin. And then I can click on the layer mask icon to create a mask around that selection. So now if I paint with white in either of these, for example this top one here, you'll see, oops, sorry about that. Let me change the brush to a regular brush and maybe bring the flow, actually the flow just down a little bit, maybe flow at about 25. So now what I can do if I paint with white on either of these layers, you'll see the changes. So on this top layer, it just starts making some areas darker, maybe like here. And on the second layer, I can make some areas brighter. So you can really play with the highlights and shadows of the extrusion to make this a little more realistic. So I'll zoom out so you can see what's going on. So that's before and that's after. So you can see it really starts shaping the inside of the eye. And you can just take more time to do that and make it more realistic, but I'm going to stop there. One thing you might want to do is select all 3 layers, put them into a group. And to save a little time, I'm just going to pause the video now and create the other eye and the mouth. I'm going to be using exactly the same steps I used to create this eye, so you really won't be missing anything. If you get stuck, just go back, watch the video. It's the same step no matter the shape that you create. Okay guys, I'm back. I gone ahead and created the other eye and fixed up this eye a little bit and created this eye here. And just so you can see what I did, I followed the shape of the pumpkin, as you can see here, to sort of make it a little more realistic, and then I added these shadows and highlights in different areas of the pulp here to again make it more realistic. So you can see it on both eyes here, you can see it in the mouth, how I just followed along the actual shape of the actual pumpkin. You can also see that here. Okay, now that we have this created, I'm gonna make a selection out of the inside of the pumpkin here, anything that's inside of this gradient with white, yellow, and orange. So to do that, I'm going to click on the layer thumbnail here to make a selection out of the shape of the eye. And by the way, I renamed the layer, so you can see that there. That's really not that important. And then on the top layer here, I'm going to hold Alt Control Shift Command Option Shift on the Mac to make a selection out of the inside of the eye there. And I'm actually going to create a new layer on top of everything else. I'm going to fill it with black. And actually, I want my layer to be outside of all the other folders. And I'm going to do the same thing for the right eye. So click on the bottom layer, Control click, Command click on the Mac, and then Control Alt Shift click, Command Option Shift click on the Mac to make a selection of the inside of the eye. And I'm going to fill that with black as well. And I'm going to do that for the mouth. Control click, Control Alt Shift click, fill with black. So now that I have this shape here, I'm going to Control click on it, Command click to make a selection out of it. Then I'm going to go into Select, Save Selection, and I'll just call it Shapes. Just because we will probably need this in the future and I want to have that saved up. So I'm just going to press OK. Alright, I'm going to press Control D to deselect. I'm actually going to turn this layer into white by pressing Control I, Command I on the Mac to invert. And I'm going to convert this into a smart object. And I'm going to apply a blur filter. So I'm going to go to Filter, Blur, Radio Blur, Amount 100%, Zoom, and Best. And I can click and drag this anywhere I want, and this is going to it's going to create this zooming effect, and it's going to make it look as if there was light coming out of those holes that we created in the pumpkin. So I'm going to move that to around this area here, and I'm going to press OK. And you can see that it created this effect. It makes it look like as if light were emitting from the pumpkin, and that's exactly what we want. And it's a smart filter, so you can go ahead and double click on it and make any adjustments if you need to. I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to go into Filter, Radio Blur, or you can just press Control F to do the same effect again. And it's just going to make this effect a little stronger, like so. I'm going to double click on it to bring up the layer style panel. I'm going to click on Color Overlay, and I'm just going to make it yellow. And I can bring the opacity down if I want to, depending on how strong I want that yellow light to be. So maybe 54%. And I'm going to press OK. So now we have this light emitting from our pumpkin. If there's some areas that you don't want light to go through, maybe for whatever reason you don't want light like under the eye, you can just click to create a new layer mask and paint with black. And you can hide some of those light streaks if you want to, but I'm just going to leave mine as they are for the most part. Okay, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to open up the pumpkin folder and duplicate this pumpkin layer here by pressing Ctrl J or Command J on the Mac. Drag it all the way to the top. Delete the layer mask. And what I'm going to do now is make sure that there's no filters or anything applied to it. So I'm just going to right click on that and click on Clear Smart Filters. And I'm going to press Ctrl T to transform, and I'm going to actually make this a little smaller. So I'm going to just bring that in just a little bit, like so. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go into my channels panel, and that selection that we saved is actually here. So you can just Control click on it to make a selection out of it. Come back into the layers panel, and I'm going to add a layer mask by clicking on the layer mask icon. So now we can set the blending mode of this top pumpkin here, the one inside the eyes, to soft light. And what that does is it creates this texture inside of the eye. So it sort of looks like there's more of that pulp inside the eye. So it's just not a complete flat gradient. There's actually some texture and something going on inside that face. So that's what we want. I'm going to zoom out. Now that we're done with our jack-o'-lantern, I'm going to select all those layers and groups, press Ctrl G, Command G on the Mac to make them into one group. And I'm just going to call this jack-o'-lantern. So this is our jack-o'-lantern layer. So now it's time to work on the background of this image. What I'm going to do now is click on the background layer and create a new gradient adjustment layer. And I'm going to work with black, and the other color that I want is a blue color, which is 27456B. It's that dark blue you see there. And I'm going to change the opacity to 100%. And I'm actually going to reverse this. So we have dark on top, blue on the bottom, and that seems to be okay. So I'm going to press OK, and this is going to be a night sky, and I need some stars, so I'm just going to create a new document, and I think it'll be easier to show you in a new document. So I'm going to fill this new document with black. Then I'm going to go into Filter, Noise, Add Noise, and it's going to add some noise, so about 42% will be okay. Then I'm going to go into Filter, Blur, Blur More. If you press Control F or Command F on a Mac, after applying a filter, it'll redo it. So I'm going to redo that blur again. So that's two blurs. Then I'm going to go into Image, Adjustment, Threshold. And if I move the slider over to the left, you'll start seeing some dots appear. This is going to be our stars. So I'm just going to press OK. I'm going to zoom in just so you can see. So you can see it looks a lot like a star field. So I'm going to go to Channels, Control click on any one of these channels, they're all the same, and it's going to create a selection out of those white dots. I'm going to add a new layer, fill it with white, and press Control D, Command D to deselect. The original background layer, I'm just going to fill it with black, just so we can see that the dots are now on this layer. You don't really need to fill it with with black, I just wanted to show you. So now, if I zoom in, I can add a blur more to that as well. And actually that was a little too strong, so I'm going to go Edit, Fade Blur, and I'm going to fade that back. So maybe somewhere around there. I can double click on this layer, click on Outer Glow, and just select a bluish color. So maybe around there. And by the way, so I'm going to set that to normal and bring the size down to about 3 pixels. So you have these blue stars there. So I can click and drag this over onto our layer, hold shift, and it'll drop it right in the middle. And here we have our star field. And by the way, I think I might have created more stars than I intended to, but that's okay. We'll just work with that. You can play around with the threshold command more if you need to, but for the sake of time, we'll leave it as is. Okay, so things are looking pretty good, but I think that this needs to be a little darker, so I'm just going to add a curves adjustment layer. I'm going to bring in the darks a little bit, and like that. So that looks a little bit more like a night scene there. And actually, on this gradient fill, if I double click on it, it brings this gradient fill panel up, and I can click and drag up a little bit, just because I want more blue here. I'm also going to add a new layer, select white as my foreground color. I'm going to select a brush. I'm going to increase the size. And I'm just going to paint with white. So maybe another pass. And I'll turn that into an overlay blending mode. And I'm going to add a new layer. And this time I'm going to choose yellow as my foreground color. And I'll do a couple passes as well. And I'll leave that there for now. I might need to play around with that a little bit in the future, but that's okay for now. So I'm just going to call this yellow and this white just so I know what they are. And this layer here is the stars, so I'll call it stars. Now we're going to create some grass. So to do that, I'm going to select this grass brush you see here. And I'm just going to create a new layer just so you can see how it works. So if I start painting, it sort of looks like grass. You just go over back and forth a whole bunch of times. It looks a lot like grass. I have two colors here that we're going to use. So the first color is 0811617, which is the dark green color. And the second color I'm going to use is 193036, which is another dark green, but not as dark as the one before. I'm going to create a new layer. I'm going to increase the size of my brush a little bit, and I'm just going to start painting. And by the way, this is a little too light, and that's because our flow is set to 25. So I'm just going to bring that up to 100. I'm going to delete that layer and create a new one. And make sure that new layer is selected. Bring the size down a little bit, and I'm just going to start painting here, here, and here, like so. Okay, I'm going to create another layer, and I'm going to make my brush just a little bit bigger and do the same thing. I'm actually going to bring that layer down, maybe right there. So I'm going to select these two layers, press Ctrl G, and I'm going to call this grass behind. And this is because this grass is going to be behind the jack-o'-lantern, so I'm going to put that behind the jack-o'-lantern there. And I'm going to zoom in just so you can see what happened. We created this very realistic looking grass just by using these two colors and using that brush that comes preloaded in Photoshop. So this is looking pretty good, I think. And I'm going to zoom out. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a little bit of blur to both of them, but I'm going to convert them into smart objects first, just so I can have the advantage of changing my blur in the future if I need to. So I'm going to start with the top layer. I'm going to go to Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur, and it'll be a subtle blur, maybe 1.4 or so. And I'll hold Alt, click on this icon here, and drag it down to apply the same blur to the other layer. Actually, maybe this top layer needs a little less blur since it's closer to us. So I'm going to double click on the Gaussian blur filter there and just bring it down just a little bit. So maybe we'll just leave it at one pixel. And I'll zoom in just so you can see. So this is what our grass looks like. Okay, so I'm going to do exactly the same thing now, but just with bigger grass blades, and this is going to be in front of the jack-o'-lantern. So I'm going to create a new layer on top of the jack-o'-lantern group and increase the size of my brush. I'll zoom out just so we can see everything better. And I'm going to start painting like so. And I'm going to add one more with much bigger blades here. Okay, and I'll do the same thing. I'll put them in one group, and I'll call this group grass front. We'll turn them into smart objects, and we'll apply a blur. We'll start with the same blur, but we might need to change it. So let's just see how it looks with the same blurs we applied before. Okay, so it's looking okay, but it's not looking very realistic because these blades are actually pretty close to the camera, so we need to add more blur to them. So I'm just gonna click on Gaussian blur and just blur those a little bit more. And I'll do the same thing for these guys here. And actually, I think we need more grass. I'm just gonna duplicate this layer. I'm gonna go to Edit, Transform, Horizontal. And I'll probably just move them down a little bit, like so. I think that's looking pretty good. And what we're going to do now is in this grass front group, at the very bottom, I'm going to add, at the very bottom under this layer here, I'm going to add another layer, and actually I want that layer to be right at the very bottom of the group. So it's behind these layers here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to zoom in, and I'm going to paint in some lighter grass blades. So I'm going to double click on this color here, and what I want is just a brighter green. And for the light color, I want maybe like a yellowish color, maybe like this color there. And I can actually paint with the same smaller brush, maybe about this big. Just paint here, like so. And actually, you know what? Maybe I'm going to drag this layer up one level. Yeah, and that looks okay, I think. There's a line here at the bottom, but we're not going to worry about that now. So I just want to paint with this brush here. Maybe make another pass with a slightly larger brush, like so. And I'm going to hold Alt and click on the layer mask icon to hide everything. I'm going to select just a regular brush, fill it with white, and just paint here, wherever I think the highlights would be. Like so. Maybe I'll paint with black just to get rid of some of those here, maybe the ones at the bottom here, like so. And there you go. If there was light coming out of the pumpkin, the grass would definitely be lit up. So this is something that you can do to create some nice lighting effects. And it's just going to take a little time to get the right lighting, but you can take time to do that on your image. This tutorial has already been long enough, so I'm not going to take too much time into shaping how the light will portray on the grass, but this will give you a good idea of how you can do that. Okay, so we're almost done with the tutorial. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to add just a few more layers to finish this up. So I'm going to go to File, Place, and I have this smoke layer here, which is just a picture of smoke. So I'm just going to press Enter and then change the blending mode to Screen. And that is just some smoke that's going to be coming out of the pumpkin. So I'm just going to click on it and drag it on top of the jack-o'-lantern, but under the grass front group. And I'm going to add a layer mask, and then with black I'm just going to paint in some areas here. So maybe there's some smoke coming out of the mouth, or maybe a little bit around the eye, maybe not so much here on the forehead, something like that. Okay, but that smoke's a little too strong, so what I'll do is I'll just bring the opacity down maybe to about 36% or so, and then I can add an adjustment layer, a hue saturation adjustment layer, clip it to the smoke, click on colorize, and now I can change the color of the smoke. So I'm looking for a greenish color, just makes it look a little more eerie. So maybe around there, and of course I can bring the opacity down of the smoke to get the right color that I have in mind. So something like that, this greenish yellowish smoke. Maybe it needs a little more yellow, so I'll bring that over. So yeah, somewhere around there. So it's a little yellow, a little green, and that's what I'm looking for. Okay, one thing I want to fix is this yellow highlight we had here, just here at the bottom. I'm just going to move that up just a little bit, because maybe there's a city or something in the background there, and it will be emitting yellow light. Maybe this is some sort of field out in a farm somewhere, and there's a city far, far away that you can see in the back. So that's what that yellow is, just a bunch of city lights, I guess. Okay, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to add just a few more layers to finish this up. So I'm going to add a new color lookup layer, a color lookup adjustment layer, and I'm going to change this to Moonlight, and it's going to make everything really, really dark, and that's not really going to work for us. So the first thing we need to brighten up is the eyes. So I'm going to click on click on the shape of the eyes in the channels panel, and I'm going to fill that with black. And what I'm going to do now is all the grass front blades, I'm going to fill those with black. So Control click, Control Shift click, Control Shift click, Control Shift click on these guys. And I'm going to fill that with black. So now if I press Control D to deselect, you'll see that the blades in the front are brighter than the ones in the back, which is exactly what we want. And also, you know what? I just realized one thing. On this grass front layer here, we didn't add a smart filter, so I'm just gonna convert that into a smart object, and I'm gonna hold Alt and drag that blur filter here, so it blurs it up. But that's a little too strong, so I'll double click on it and bring that back just to sort of match the same blurriness as the other grass blades. So things are looking a little bit better now. Alright, so I'm gonna zoom out, and I'm gonna go back into that color lookup that we're working on this layer here. And what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to grab my brush, and I'm going to change the flow way down to about 35. And I'm just going to bring in some color back into the pumpkin. Just not too much, just a little bit. Maybe here, like so. Actually bring the flow even down even further, maybe 12. Yeah, that works good. And maybe just around the pumpkin, like so. Yeah, so this is before and after. And I'm going to add one more color lookup adjustment layer. And this time it's going to be a film stock. And it's really going to make that pumpkin stand out. So I'm going to go back into my channels, control click on the shapes to make a selection out of that. Fill it with black. And I actually only want to affect the pumpkin, nothing else. And actually there's a better way I could have done this, but oh well. So I'm going to control click on the pumpkin to make a selection out of the pumpkin, and then just go to select, click on inverse to inverse the selection, go back up to the very top color lookup and fill that with black. Press Ctrl D to deselect. So now you make your pumpkin a whole lot scarier just by adding that one single adjustment layer. And I can actually click on that and paint with black to sort of fix the bottom part here, since we don't need to affect the grass blades, like so. So if I zoom in, click on these double arrows here to collapse that, just so we can see the pumpkin a little bit better. So here you go. This is our final result. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them down below. If you're at my website, you can enter your email on the sidebar to get access to my subscriber-only tutorials. Also, don't forget to share this tutorial on Facebook, Twitter, Google+, or wherever you like to share your stuff. As always, thank you for watching, and I'll talk to you guys next time.